and also to show how to use it for people that doesn't know about it. So I'll share my screen. Okay. Do you see?
Yeah.
Okay. Before I begin, let me give some references before I start talking about it. So for people who doesn't know anything about SQL and get interested about the content of my presentation today, I know there is thousands and thousands of places in the internet to look for stuff, so you can search where you prefer. I put here the link for W3 Schools, which has some really nice examples for all kinds of databases. And almost everything that you can do, you can find some examples in here. So it's really easy for look for examples and also to how to apply those examples in your automation. And also some documentation from UiPath itself on how to install the package with the database activities, and also one article showing some examples that you can even download the workflow and see how it's done. The presentation that I have today is split into 4 parts. 3 of them is based on a business use case that I made up. It's not a real one because it's very simple, but the idea behind it can be used for any kind of development. So I will begin by showing in the system, in the ERP, how that would be done. So if you would not use SQL, you will see the activities that you would need to perform, like opening the browser, logging in, opening the application, retrieving the fields, and this kind of things. So you have an idea of how the user would do it, or how the application, the automation would do it if it would use UI activities. And then I have two cases. One to use a more simple way to implement SQL to do exactly the same thing. So to do what the user would do manually, but this time using SQL. And the third point is a little bit more complex than the second. It will achieve the same result, but also with more performance-wise, let's say like this. So it's a little bit more complex, but you get to the result easily. And the fourth one is not related to this business case. It's more like a bonus that I don't know if I'm going to have time to show, but I'll let you know more when we got there. So to begin with, I will show very quickly how to do what I'm going to show in UiPath, but this time in the ERP. So the purpose here is imagine that we have the name of one user, and we want to go into the ERP and get the purchase orders created by this user. It's a very simple task, but it shows exactly what are the possibilities for us to integrate UiPath with SQL. So I'll switch off from the presentation now, and I will go to our ERP, if I can. Yep. So here you can already see what would be needed. So you would need to open the browser. You would need the credentials to log in the system. Then you would need to open the application. And because we just start with the name of the person, I'm gonna have to do this in 3 steps. First, I will fetch the address number of that user. And then from the address number, I'll get the user ID. And from the user ID, I'll get the orders. So to begin with, let's say that we have my name. And I will just search in here. I will have some information about myself, such as the address number, my tax ID, which is not my tax ID. Would be very cool if it would. But then I will retrieve the address number, and in another application, I will be able to retrieve the user ID from that is assigned to this address number. So you see that we now have 2 applications that we would need to create workflows for. and several fields that we need to populate, several stack clicks that we need to do to retrieve the data that we need. I will open it in here. And here I have my user ID. For the people in the call that is familiar with JD Edwards, I changed it a little bit how this retrieval of data is done. So don't get upset with me. It's just for the matter of the presentation. And lastly, we will need to go to the last application, which is to, in fact, retrieve the purchase orders that was generated by that user. So I'm going to open a third application. And with the user ID that I got based on the address number that I got from the username, I will be able to fetch what orders I have created in the system. So you see, I went 3 applications, and now I have the information in front of me, which I would need to extract to a data table if I would be doing that with UI activities. So that's it. That's the whole flow. Three applications, 3 tables that will give me this result. Very simple, but the idea behind it can be applied to any more complex activity that you might need to do. Okay, so the first use case that now we integrate UiPath with SQL is to do the exactly same thing, but this time we are not going to do anything in their ERP. We are just going to connect to the database and execute some queries, some SQL queries that will bring us this result. And in the end, we will have the same information, but way more easier. And how it's done, I will switch now to UiPath. Everything that you need to do is in this dependency, the database activities. So you have to install it. And in fact, you just need to use 2 activities from this package. You have to use the database connection and the execute query. I'll go one by one and we'll explain exactly how it looks like. So to begin with, I have the 3 variables in here. And remember that this first one is a simpler way to do that. I will do individual queries retrieving the information for each of the variables. So I have the variables defined in here. So the address number, the user ID, I'll have to get them. But for now, I already have my name, which is the same that I typed in JD Edwards before. First step to do is to retrieve the accounts from the database. So this is a standard asset in the orchestrator. So I have the assets defined here, and I will retrieve the database password and the database user. No much news about that. Then I have another asset that I need to retrieve, and this is the data source name, or DSN. With those 2, it's already possible to make the connection to the database as long as you have the data source installed in the computer that the automation is going to run. And that works like this. You have the ODBC on the system, and in this you have the driver for the database, and you have the connection set up, and then this connection has a name, so the data source name. And this value right here that you can see on this column is the value that is going to be retrieved from this database DSN. So if I have one server that my automations are executed and I want to execute them on my computer, I just need to have the same data source name in here, and the same process will work correctly in both machines. This is available in details in the documentation. I'm not going to go through how to set this up or install the driver. Otherwise, we will stay here for a long time, and this is not the purpose of this meeting. So keep in mind that this is one of the requirements, and then the rest is everything done in UiPath. So I got the assets, and now I can already create the connection. So the connection is relatively simple to do, most because you can make use of the connection wizard, and that will create for you the connection string that you need to use. If I show you, it looks like this. It basically gives you, it might look like this if you're using the same database that I am. So in my case, I'm using now Oracle. It looks like this for Oracle, but it might look differently for another database. But the connection wizard will help you with this as well. If you have a different database, the connection string may look a little bit different, but it should follow the same sequence. You have the data source name, you have the user ID, and you have the password. That's everything that has to be done. And then you define which is the provider that you are connecting to. So as I mentioned before, we are using ODBC to have the driver installed in the Windows, and it just connects there and gets the connection. And all this will give us the database connection. And this is pretty much it. We do this activity and the connection is available for us, and we can reuse as long as the robot executes. Usually this has to be done only once. I do on the initialization of the robots, and I queue the connection on the end process. So just once, and that's it. Next, we define the query. And here it's important to note, not sure if I mentioned before, here in the use case 1, I have the query within the code. And in the use case 2, I will have the query outside the code. Both cases have some advantages and disadvantages. I will talk a little bit about this later on, but this one is within the code. So I basically have the variable in here, and I have it hard-coded what the query will do. And I'll show here in this file, it will do something like this. I will look for the table that I know the information will be, and I will pass the value that I'm searching for. So in this case, this value will be the variable that I already have defined here on the top. So if you look to the value of this sign, you see that query, and here we have the variable. You can use string builder if you want. I prefer to use this concatenation because for a query simple as this, it doesn't really matter. But when it's really big, it may be a little bit more difficult to read. But it's up to each one to do whatever way they like. So with the SQL ready, the only thing that we need to do now is to actually execute the query. So this is another activity from this package. And what you need to pass is the database connection, which we did before in the step before. And you pass the SQL, which is the string containing the information that you are going to execute. And with those two, you are going to have a data table. So every single query that you execute will return you a data table. No matter if it's one line or multiple lines, it's always going to be one data table. Then I just do a simple check to see if the data table is not empty. If it's empty, just do a throw to something went wrong. If it's not empty, then I assign the value of the field that I want to my variable, to the address number. So in here, you see that I look to the first row of the data table and I get the column that I need. And this column is defined by the query. If you look to the query in here, I have this first parameter saying which is the column name, how it's going to be retrieved. So I'm using an alias for the column ID in the database. So technically I can change this to whatever value I want, but keeping the alias as it is, the rest of the code I don't really need to change. By having this, I have retrieved the address number, which was the first step that I did on the ERP. And with the address number, I can do the next step, which is to get the user ID. Now everything is very similar, so I won't go into much details. I'll have another query in here, but this time, instead of passing my name, I will pass the address number, because with the address number, I can get the user ID. And that is sent to the execute query activity. And this activity is literally a copy of this one. It's exactly the same thing. I even use the same variables. And that will give me the result in a data table as well, which I will extract to the user ID. Exactly the same thing. Now I have the address number, I have the user ID, I can get the data. So the last step is for the third application, which I will have another query. And this time I pass my user ID in the query that will return me the values that I want to see. So should bring me those values right here. So I execute this last SQL and I will have all the information that I need in my data table. So to finalize, I just do a print in the console just to make it simple. And lastly, I disconnect from the database. So if I run this workflow, you should see something similar to this, where I have 8 lines. And there we go. Here I have 8 lines. So we avoided creating at least 4 workflows or 1 bigger workflows with all the clicks and selects and retrieve data and this kind of things, to just execute 1 workflow with all the activities that will give you exactly the same result. So by doing this, we are already saving a lot of time. And I think it makes the code way more reliable. You don't need to worry if the ERP is online, if the browser is open, if the connection, if the login was successful, if the application is open. So you don't have to worry about all those error handling, you know. So just by doing this, which is the easiest way, already makes, on my perspective, our lives way more easier. But then I have the, sorry. Yeah, I have, there we go. The second use case, which I have 2 differences here. It basically does exactly the same as before, but instead of doing 3 different steps to retrieving one data, then another data, then the final data, I do everything in just one SQL. So everything is performed in just one query, and the value is retrieved to me automatically. That's also possible, but then it gets a little bit more complicated because we do joins within the tables, and for this you need to know the relationship of the tables. You have to know which field will have to be referenced to the other field, but can be a little bit difficult in the beginning, but as soon as you get more experience, then it gets easier. And the other change that I'm doing here is having this SQL outside my code. So it's not hard-coded in the system, but in an external file, which I will talk about the benefits and disadvantages in a little bit. For now, let us look to the workflow. It's basically the same thing, but this time way shorter, because I just have one execute query activity, right? So the same thing I do on the top, I have my initial variable that's passed, could be passed by an argument, or could be retrieved by another application, by an Excel or whatever. You have the variable, which is the name of the person that you are looking for. And this time I have the path, which holds the file which I'm going to have my query fetched from. In this case, it's within the project itself, but it could be in a network drive, it could be on SharePoint folder, it could be anywhere you want. Same as before, I get the assets, I create the connection. This time I read the file, so I read the path, and which gives me the content of the file in a string variable. And because of this, I can't simply execute it, because you should not leave information on the query. For instance, what I do, I use wildcards. So whenever I need to place a variable within the query, I try to put stuff like this. So the percentage, the name of the variable, and another percentage. And then I use a replace activity within the code to change this value to whatever I want. So in here, I'm replacing the percentage name percentage to my variable name, which was defined on top as my name. So if you have a bigger query that you have to replace different values, you might do this multiple times or one time, whatever way that you prefer. To explain a little bit how this query works, I have all the information that I used in the previous one, which was divided in 3. I have it in here. It does exactly the same, but it's merged in just one. So here I have the columns that are going to be retrieved in my data table. And here the alias for each column name. Then I specify which are the tables that I'm going to use. And for the ones that are going to be linked with the main table, I'm going to pass to specify how they are connected. So this is a little bit technical, but when you get to know how join works, then it might be a little bit easier for you to understand how this connection is done. If you are a beginner, I would say for you to start doing different queries and retrieving them one by one. It already makes your performance be better. And then when you feel comfortable, you should move to something more complex than this. And lastly, I have my where clause where I will say how I want this to be looked at. And then I have my alpha name, which is my name, to be the same as my variable. So that's what I do. I get this value, I replace the wildcard that I do, and I pass this SQL to the execute query. So exactly the same thing. Now I'm going to have my data table returned to me in just one activity, and the value is there. So if I run this, there we go. So all the information that is in JD Edwards, in my ERP in this case, is in here, and also some more information, because now as I joined all the tables together, I brought more columns, so I'm also showing more columns as well. So you can see the same thing done in different ways, and one has more activities, the other has less activities. And the thing that I said that I would comment a little bit is to leave the query within the code and outside the code. I don't think there is right or wrong here. I think it really depends on application by application. Technically speaking, it should be within the code because that makes part of your automation, if you understand what I mean. And to change, then you would need to change the automation. So it's not something that anybody would go there and change. And that would be more secure for, yes, meaning that nobody could change the SQL by itself. They would need to change the robot, create a new package, load to orchestrator, and that's it. By having it in an external file, it makes way more easier for us to do maintenance. So if you have the queries in a network drive, for instance, and something changes, you can easily change the conditions in here. You can change the joins, even the columns you can change, as long as they are not, the alias is not changed if used within the automation. So it gives a lot of flexibility for us to do support and hot fixes for the automations without having to change the code itself. However, it's not secure, meaning that anybody that has access to this file can easily break your robot. So if they put a comma where it should not be, it's done. The robot will not work anymore. So this is one of the things that you have to take in consideration. If you have a way to easily store those queries in a secure place where not many people have access to and nobody will change, then I would say go for it. Here in Darling, we are constantly audited in some automations, and the auditors, they love to ask to see the queries. So in the first robots that I did, I used to put all of them within the code and to show them and explain how it works and how it got there. It was a little bit messy. So now I'm starting to move them outside the code, saving in a SharePoint folder. And whenever they ask for it, I just give them the file and say, yeah, good luck. If you can understand, then that's what the robot does. However, for us, it's a little bit easy to do this because the location that we have the data stored is completely secure. It's so secure that I don't even have access myself. And that's really true, but that's in production. So the people that have access to this is a limited number of people. And everybody knows if something changed and it's wrong, we know who did it. So That's why it's secure. Okay, so this is for the use cases to do to retrieve data from the database as we would do in the ERP. Do I still have time?
Maybe 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay, very
Yeah.
quick then. The last one, it's kind of a bonus. I just made one example here for us to how to use stored procedures. This is another possibility for us to use with databases, and that we can move the code from UiPath to the database, but still call it from UiPath. So storage procedures are basically code that you can create, and they are stored in the database. So going really quickly here, I have, for instance, this procedure called test presentation, very original, which receives one value for a fruit, that's the string. And with this, it will do some checks. It will check if this value already exists in the database. If it doesn't exist, it will insert a new value in the database and add the quantity as 1. But if it already exists, it will just increment the quantity. So I'm taking out from the code from UiPath. So I don't have to do the select, bring the fruit, see how much quantity I have, or if I have it, and then do another call to the database to do the insert or do the update. This is everything done automatically within the code, meaning that in UiPath, we just call it once. So if I go to the option 3, everything on the top remains the same. So you see here, I have strawberry. I will change to banana, for instance, because I know that banana haven't used it yet. So I get the assets, I get the connection, I define the query, which is basically a SQL slightly different. I do the replace to change for the fruit that I'm using, and I execute it. The execution is exactly the same, except the command typing here is, instead of text, is a stored procedure. The rest remains exactly the same. There's really no difference. So if I run it now, you see that I will have banana as 1 because I just executed. And now if I run it again, it will see that banana already exists in there and will just increment by 2. So I don't have here a select that I get the fruit and I get the quantity. And I don't have a query that I do the update and this kind of things. Everything is done in the database on this procedure. So with this, we can also move some code outside the robot to make it easier for us to do the maintenance. As you can see, the banana S2. So a slightly different way to work with SQL as well, and to try to make our lives easier by having less maintenance on the robot or more flexibility on the database, because everything is done in there in this kind of thing. So we don't need to bring to UiPath and bring back to the database and keep this communication. If everything is there, it's good that it remains there. That would be all. Sorry if I said too much or I went over time. Is there any questions?
I saw or do I have to put it in the chat? Sorry, Egert.
Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
I saw that you had a very high timeout time. Do you have problems with with timeouts? Because maybe databases are slow or your queries are not fully optimized?
Yes, this really high timeout is because one of our automations has one query that runs for around 5 to 10 minutes. So I put the time really on top, and I kind of just left like this for our other automations as well, because it might seem a lot, but it's actually in milliseconds, so it's not that much. I think it's 10 or 10 minutes, I guess. So yeah, ideally you should not have this high timeout, but I guess I just miss it to change here.
We know at least Barend put attention to your presentation. It's a good question. Are there any other questions? Don't be shy. Pedro doesn't bite. Otherwise, they can still be put in the chat. Pedro will be around for a while, so then you can answer them in the chat. Pedro, thanks a lot for your presentation.
No problem.
Very nice deep dive in SQL for some beginners, but also a nice bonus in the end. I see we still have all the participants, so I think you got everyone's attention. And I know we're using, and you are using this especially a lot within our project as well, and that's going very successfully. So thanks again. Yeah, and then we'll move to the next speaker, that is Barend. So Barend, I will introduce you to the stage, and you can share your screen as well. And then looking forward to your presentation.
Unmute, I was still muted. I think you can all see my screen.
Yeah.
All right. Well, first a short introduction. My name is Barend van Rooij. Last year, I finished my master's in information sciences. But by then I was already working at Tacstone as a UiPath developer. I started in 2018. And since then, I've automated processes at schools, healthcare institutions, employment agencies, and all other, or a lot of other different businesses. For today, I was asked to tell you all about one of my latest projects at Human Capital Services, in which I applied UiPath document understanding. What I'm going to do today is first give a small introduction into UiPath document understanding. I think most of you have heard about it. I don't think most of you have worked with it. So I'm going to do a small introduction, then I'm going to introduce the case I did at Human Capital Services. I'll show a demo, and then I'll tell you about some lessons I learned using UiPath document understanding. What is UiPath document understanding? To be quick, document understanding is the UiPath document processing pipeline, in which they make it easier to process documents and validate data using RPA. The pipeline consists of 6-7 steps, depending on how you see it. The first thing is you create a taxonomy and load the taxonomy. The taxonomy is like a structured file of which documents the framework has to recognize and what data to extract from those documents. The next step is the digitization of the document. If it's not a native PDF, UiPath document understanding makes it easier to apply OCR to digitize the document. The next step is classifying, in which a classifier is used to identify what kind of document it is based on the taxonomy. If the robot is not certain enough about the classification, it's possible to create a validation action, which gives a user the possibility to validate the classification or change the classification. Based on the classification, the robot will extract data from the document. To do this, there are a couple of different options, including a couple which use machine learning. In this presentation, I will not go into the machine learning part, as it's a little bit beyond my expertise. I will mainly focus on document understanding and the framework. And the last step is exporting the data to whatever data structure you want, so you can use it in another part of your process. To give a quick introduction of the case, human capital services is well, let me start on the other end. In the Netherlands, an employer is obligated to take care of their employees who are unfit for work due to illness or disability. This is a very difficult and time-consuming and costly process. So human capital services take over this process and make sure that you can focus on your business and your employees get the help and during this process that they need. One of their processes is called WGA case management. The employee insurance agency, or UWV, corresponds with employers about well, the unfit workers and their benefits. Those correspondence from the UWV always come in the form of letters, which are received both digitally but also on paper. Some of these letters cover a certain topic called WGA beschikkingen, and that is the type of letters that are processed in this case. WGA beschikking letters cover which category of benefits the employee is going to receive and why, and HCS registers this information for report and other purposes. So there are 27 types of documents, which is quite a lot. There are about 20 orders a day. Or when a person does this job, it takes about 10 minutes per order, which comes to about 4 hours a day. The plan of HCS was they wanted to have a bigger completeness of data. Now or before this robot, they weren't registering everything because it took too much time. Now it's possible to register more. It's also to increase the correctness of data. Typos were a big issue in this process. Now, well, the robot doesn't make typos. And they also wanted to use it as a possibility for growth. Right now, or before the robot, they were at their capacity. If they wanted to get more clientele, they had to hire another person, but instead they opted to automate and grow by using RPA. So the process consists of 3 scripts. I will explain why at the end, but just to give a quick overview, on the right side you have an example of the document and also highlighted which kind of data the robot had to extract. The process consists of someone uploading a file, a PDF, to a portal, and the portal then creates a task for the robot. The robot opens the task and downloads the PDF. The second script applies document understanding, so digitizing, classifying, extracting data, and then exporting the data to Excel. The last script reads the Excel, searches the dossier in the web app based on information in the Excel, checks the dossier for completeness, and then adds the beschikking and the data from the Excel to the dossier. I have because, well, as you can imagine, there's a lot of sensitive information used in this process. So I made a dummy video or an example video of what the robot does using dummy data. So I can't make any mistakes and potentially show you something you should not see, or yeah, something about it. I will talk you through this. Most of it is not that interesting or new for you. the robot logs in using two-factor authentication, which is kind of cool. It creates its own two-factor authentication codes. It then goes to the new tasks and opens one of the tasks to download the document. Well, this is not really something you have not seen before, but when the document is downloaded, the next script takes over and starts digitizing the document. As you can see, there's one document to be digitized and to be processed. In this case, the robot creates a classification validation task, just to show you how it works. The task is then visible in the Action Center and is also automatically assigned to a user. As you can see, the robot classified this document as a as a certain kind of beschikking. It's 77% certain. That's based on a keyword-based classifier, so it uses keywords and keywords combinations to identify the document. When clicking on the little blue arrow, I should say, it's possible to see the text on which the classifier based its classification. This gives the user the possibility to easily check why the robot thinks it's this kind of document, and it also gives the user the ability to change the keywords used to classify a document. When the user is certain about the classification, they will click continue or save, and the robot will then continue to extract the data based on the classification. It then creates a new validation task, in this case an extraction validation task. And as you can see on the left side, the robot extracted most of the data needed. The cool thing about this is that it's all color-coded, so you can easily see in the text what data is represented on the left side and where it stands in the text on the right side. In this case, the document is still loading, but when the PDF loads, you can see where the robot gets the data. The cool thing also is you can click on the data and the PDF will automatically jump to its position in the text. When the user is done validating all the data, you can see that in this case, the werkgever, the employer, is not filled in. The user can then look for the employer in the text. In this case, it's all the way at the top, Tacstone RPA team. They can select it in the text and then just click add and click save, and it's added to the output of the document understanding. At the end, the data is put into an Excel document. In this case, Excel is used to store locally, so we don't have to send this information to another server to store it over there, which is a little bit more secure. Then the last part of the script, or the last script, takes over and takes up the PDF and the Excel document and looks up the dossier in the same system as it was before, checks the dossier if, for instance, the beschikking is not added before, and then adds the beschikking to the dossier, which is not that interesting. I think we've all seen something like this before. So this is a really quick view on what UiPath document understanding can do. I want to continue to the next slide. My lessons learned using UiPath document understanding. I think it's a little bit more interesting for most of you. In this case, we did not use machine learning. we only use the so-called regex extractor. There are 3 or 4 different kinds of extractors you can use. The cool thing about only using the regex extractor is that everything about the UiPath pipeline, except for the machine learning part, is already integrated into your license. So you can easily apply this. And if you think, well, the regex extractor is not sufficient anymore, I want to try and apply some machine learning model, it's really easy to add that to your already existing pipeline by just adding one activity and selecting one box per value. And then you're switched from your regex extractor to, for instance, a machine learning extractor or a form extractor or any kind of extractor you want to use. One thing I learned is, and that's why I split the process up in 3 parts, is you should always split the document understanding part from the non-document understanding part. Because you're using so-called long-running workflows, you have to put your task creation activities in the main XAML. This means that, for instance, integrating document understanding into the Rooij framework is kind of difficult, as you do most of your processing in the process.xaml, and taking things out of the process.xaml creates, well, a bit of a sticky situation. This is also due because you, if you want to create a task and wait for the task to be finished, but continue processing other documents, you want to use the so-called parallel for each document. And what it means is a for each loop, which does each iteration next to each other. So it processes all the loops at the same time. So it can stop one of the loops and still continue to process the other loop. When I started this project or this case, there wasn't a document understanding framework yet. UiPath just released it, and it was not, well, fully supported yet. Now there is a document understanding framework, and I would say please use it. I created it myself. It kind of looks the same, but well, it's not as good as the one UiPath created. So it's one of the lessons I learned. One of the other things is integrate the workforce in your design procedure. In this case, I had to work together with a lovely woman, but she's very good at her job, but she's a bit older and not as skilled with automation and computers as I or you might be. So I made the mistake of creating a beautiful process which didn't fully fit what she needed in her day-to-day life to make this process work. So make sure you integrate the workforce in your design procedure. Make sure that your product lines up with what they actually need. Another one is non-native PDFs and regex are not the best combination, as you can probably imagine. Scans and OCR results are not that great. So we noticed that it took quite a lot of tuning of the regex expressions to get some decent results, which was a bit unfortunate. But creating a machine learning model, especially for this data, would be even more difficult. So we opted for regex. Document understanding is not always the quickest solution, as you probably also noticed. digitizing documents using OCR is not very quick. In this case, there are not that many documents, but when you scale up the amount of documents, it will become a long process, and it will take a lot of time before all documents are processed. The last thing, or not the last, but one of the things I also want to say is the results will get better over time. If you use your classifier and you integrate your training scope in the correct way, which is also already done in the document understanding framework, you train your classifier by validating classifications, which in turn will improve the classification results and will reduce the amount of validation needed on the classification. One other important thing, as I mentioned before, you've got the, when you're using document understanding, you will use the parallel for each activity. And it's important to look at the scope of each variable within that activity. Because you're processing each iteration next to each other, you have to make sure that each variable used is only used within the scope of the iteration. If it's used also outside the scope of the iteration, you will get a mismanage of data allocated to that variable. For instance, if I use a number, a counter for each iteration, and the counter variable is scope is connected to well the sequence where the parallel for each is located. You will see that it will stay. For instance, if you start at 0 and you up it with 1, it will stay 0, 0, 0, 0, 0 until everything is finished, and then it will execute the +1 of every iteration at the same time. So if you have 10 iterations, it will change from 0 to 10 in one step. So it's very important to make sure that the variables scope is only limited to the body of the parallel for each. One other thing I want to have a look at is the possibility to change the extraction results. As you saw, the extraction results are shown in the left side of the extraction validation. And in some cases, it's possible to use rules to allocate certain fields. For instance, in the case of a certain document, it was if the text contains a certain text, the robot should not look at the date of release, but at the date of the starting date of the document, something like that. So it's possible to edit this extraction object before pushing it to a validation action, if you get what I mean. But it's all linked in the presentation, as you can see. It's a certain kind of document or a certain type of variable which is manipulable, which is very useful if you want to automatically validate certain data. I think that's it. I see some talk in the chat, maybe some questions I can answer. Let's see, I can't find it yet. I never use Zoom, to be honest. Show word video. Ebert, can you help me by maybe reading out the chats, because I can't find it?
Yeah, no worries. There's a question from Dion. which indeed suggesting that there is a limitation to the number of pages that you can use with this document understanding framework. Is that correct?
No, you can, as far as I know, in this setup, just using a keyword-based classifier and a regex extractor, it's possible to process a limited amount of pages.
Yeah, maybe I can comment on that. It's other Dion from UiPath.
Oh, okay. Hi.
So maybe to prevent some confusion. But you are totally right. When you're using the regular expressions with keyword classifier, you can actually use it for free without limitations. Once you start using the machine learning and the machine learning classifier, or even use the template-based extractor, which also is another extractor method we have. We have a couple of them. Then there can be some cost involved on a document count-based, so volume-based count. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dion, for clarifying. It's good to have you in the call as well.
No problem.
Great. Are there any other questions? If not, then I will also thank you, Barend, for your presentation.
Thanks for having me.
And yeah, I hope it encourages everyone to to start using document understanding, or at least explore how it works. I know there is a course in the UiPath Academy as well. I think it's between 4 or 5 hours. It teaches you how to use document understanding. There's also some other white papers you can download if you Google for it. You need to drop your email address because then you can get some spam from your iPad.
Can I jump in, Ebert? I recommend there is indeed a course, but there's also an example of document understanding in use, which takes only an hour. Which also shows the correct way to set up the framework and how to use certain activities, which is, I think, even more useful.
Okay, great. And that's on the Academy, or is it on YouTube?
It's also on the Academy, yes.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so there's some great content there. So you all know where to find the Academy. All right, thanks, Barend. Yeah, then I mean, going to the toilet or grabbing something to drink, you can still do that by yourself. So that's the good thing of these virtual sessions. We don't need to have that long breaks, and unfortunately, we can look forward to a nice beer afterwards because we will have to save that for the next time that we are here in Rooij. But nevertheless, we're still looking forward to you, Ronak, and your presentation. So I'm glad to have you on board as well.
Thank you so much.
I will give you the stage, and then yeah, enjoy.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Yes, let me know if you can see.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, cool. So my name is Ronak Gupta. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to present. I'm working in TomTom as a RPA solution architect, and we have started the RPA Center of Excellence in TomTom somewhere in April 2019, and since then we are going with the full-scale program. And we have automated in finance, HR, enterprise IT, consumer finance, treasury, payroll, and so on. So in many departments, we have the RPA automation, and we have automated close to 200 plus script and you can say task and processes, end-to-end processes, some of them. And so today I'm going to present about one of the process which we have automated for the finance department, purchase to pay team. Where we did the UiPath automation on the COUPA. So COUPA is our purchasing system, and on this purchasing system, we are making some API calls to perform some actions. Let me move to the next slide. 1 second. Yeah, here you go. So this is my today's agenda. So here I'm going to give you a business expectation overview. So you can say business context and objective. What all are the business values we have achieved and why we have choose API call over the UI automations. And in the end, the lesson learned we have. So the business context is, as you can see here, our objective is to close the purchase order line items and balancing of the goods received and invoice received. So what does it mean? So when we say purchasing system, for example, if you want to buy something, you go to Amazon website and find out the product which you want to buy, then you add it into the card and proceed for the payment and you pay, and then it get delivered to yourself. But in an organization, the process is that the process is still same, but in the back end, it looks a little bit different because you are not paying the money, the company is paying the money. So in order to do that, you need to be very sure that you are buying with a contracted supplier, and then you are buying a limited quantity, and there are so many validations which you need to do before you can order something. So we have a purchasing system COUPA, and we have an ERP system SAP. So in align with the SAP and COUPA, we need to perform these actions to close the purchase order line item and the balancing of good receipt and invoice receipt. A scope of this automation is to ensure that the good receipt is processed in time. Good receipts and invoice receipt is balanced both in COUPA and as well as in SAP. PO lines are maintained, completed, and closed for changes within a certain period of time. If we open a purchase order for a long time, then it would be difficult for a team to track it, and also the person can make changes over the period of time. So to prevent that, we need to close the purchase order within a certain period of time. Also to have the proper purchase to pay and the reporting status. So to have it and to fill the gap between the COUPA and SAP, we need to perform this automation. Here you can see these all are the business values which we have achieved. So you can say, of course, the manual and repeated works get eliminated. So otherwise we could have one people who is doing this job at least per week to gather all the purchase order which has the need by date, you can say, which is coming to end, and they need to take some actions. So this manual and repeated works get eliminated. And by automating this process, we can save up to 30 hours per month. So yeah, and the two important business value which we have achieved is to have the purchase order reconciled periodically. That means we have this whole process of 6 weeks. So we need to run different steps of different robots or different steps of this process within a period of 6 weeks to do the reconciliation. So, when we have a automation, we can reconcile it periodically and we can run it on a weekly basis, so that there will be no big backlog for the team to take the manual actions. Also, we can reconcile purchase order in bulk as well, because this automation we just implemented 3-4 weeks ago. But before that, there are lots of purchase order in the line which we need to reconcile. Otherwise, the status and reporting status is not so good. So this is the benefits we have achieved. Now, why we choose the API call over the UI automation? So when I talk from a developer point of view, UI automation is always easy because business can tell you the step by step, like where you need to go in application, what you need to click, what you need to change, and in the end, you can build a robot and do that. But going with the API call, there are few advantages, which I would like to highlight here is the most stable solution. So we don't need to be dependent upon the front end of the website. So if there is any upgrade to the application or something, we don't need to worry about. It gives us more stable solution. The second one is the low maintenance. So we don't need to be worried about if there is a new release or a new version of the COUPA is coming. Still, we can use an API call. We can fetch the data from the backend, or we can alter anything in the COUPA from backend. The third one is high efficiency. If we go from front end, then of course, the automation will take more time to do one transaction. Here, with the help of API, we can do it very fast and very quickly. And also the server efficiency is well managed. Our robot license is not so busy for a period of time to doing the same repeated activity. The next one is high accuracy. When we are performing API call, that means we are going from point to point. So there is no less or very, very less chance until and unless you make a wrong API call. But otherwise, there is a less chance to have something wrong in the system. Last and the most important from the process point of view. So when we make this automation with the help of API call, this is completely independent of the line number order within a purchase order. So when I say a purchase order, that means in a purchase order, you can buy as much as things you want in a single purchase order. So here I put a screenshot. You can say a combination of screenshot, because there you can see line number 1, line number 2, and then 8, 9. So let's assume this purchase order has total 9 line item. So a person can order 9 different things in a single purchase order, and every line item can have the different amount, different quantity, as well as the different need by date, which means that this purchase order should be open until the date which is given by the person who created the purchase order. So for example, the biggest challenge is when we do the front end automation, each purchase order line is coming on a one page. So if there is number line on which I need to perform some action, then I need to go 9 times in the next page to get this correct line ID. And then I can take the action, which is very, very unstable if I do with the UI automation, as well as it's a little bit tricky, because if there is any application change or something, then I need to update the whole scenario. So to solve this, when we do with the API call, so we can directly go to this line number 9, and that's it. So the job can be done. Here you can see with the help of API call, we can change the status, quantity, price, any amount, or the need by date as well. We can put some comment as well in the comment of the purchase order, so that if any purchasing team or any other team is referring to, so they can also see what action has taken place by a robot. These all are the benefits. Now this is our end-to-end process flow. So you can see we start our process here and we end, but in between there are total 7 robots. So we divided this end-to-end process into 7 different steps, where in the step number 1, we are sending reminders to the people. We cannot make any change without giving a notification to the person, because changing with the API can be very fast, but at the same time, the person who created purchase order, they again can get panic and they will raise a question like, what happened to my purchase order? So to do this, we have a robot which is sending the reminder, and in the end, we are communicating after performing these all API calls. You can see I'm making an API call in this robot number 2, robot number 4, robot number 5, robot number 6. Our ultimate aim to perform this robot number 6, but these all are the steps which we need to take in order to give the users a time to think about it and to take the necessary action. If until the robot number 6, if they don't take any action, then they will get a communication email saying that this all action has been taken as per the standard process, and this all changes has been done by a robot. So you need to, if you really need something else, then you need to contact the team manually. The robot number 4 and 5 is to handle the exception, because we cannot jump from robot 2 to 6 directly. Of course, there are some exception and some business exception which are known to us. So to deal with it, again, we need to perform 2 more API call before we can do the final round of closing. Now, so what did we do and how did we do? Here you can see I have added a screenshot of the reminder email which we are sending to the users. So you can see the email looks like very personalized and customized. So we are keeping the name of the person. We have a table of the purchase order on which they need to take the action, and the text, what action they need to take. And in the end, we have a link of the document where they can refer the process manual. So what action they need to take, on which team they need to contact. And here we have provided the link in the COUPA. So if they want to make any changes, they don't need to look, open a COUPA and look for on which order I need to do something. They can click directly over here and this will jump into COUPA and they can take the necessary action. After this reminder, we are running the robot 2. That means we are soft closing this order for receiving. That means they can still do the invoicing, but they cannot add more line items here. So it's you can say a partial closed, I can say. To make an API call, we need following inputs. So you can see each purchase order has a purchase order number, purchase order line ID, purchase order ID, then purchase order line number, then the status, and the need by date, which is most important. In this robot, what we are doing, we are changing this status from received to soft close for invoicing. As you can see in the line number 2, it's already soft close for invoicing. So to make an API call, what we need to do, we need this PO ID and the line number. And in the end, we can put these two in a API URL. And after putting this in an API URL, we can change the status. Now I'm going to show you a video clip where our robot is closing with the help of API. Here you can see this is an example of a purchase order. This is the purchase order line ID, purchase order number again, and you can see line number 1. And the status of line number 1 is partially received. I'm going to close it with the help of API call and UiPath robot. So you can see this is my robot. If I run it, most of the things happen in the background, so you really don't see it, but we can see, of course, the output from the API call. Here you see in the headers log, you can see the status value 200 OK. So if the status is 200 and OK, that means the API call was successful. If I reload the page, you will see the status has changed to soft close for receipt. So this is just one example in the robot 2, which we are changing it. But in the robot 4 and 5, we can alter the quantity as well as the price. And also we can put some comments here. And also we can change this status. So this status can be received, partially received, soft close for receiving, and in the end, soft close for receiving an invoice. And after a certain period of time, this can be completely closed. So it's like no one can make any work on this. So if they really need to do or really need to work on it, then they need to raise a new purchase order. Now I'm going to show a piece of code where we are making API calls. So you can see we are making API get call and API put and post. So the PO ID which we can see from the front end is not the ID which we need to make an API call. So there is an internal inventory ID which we need it before we can take any action. So here you can see this is my URL. So URL looks like this one. So you can see HTTPS, the host name, API, and then here I'm passing the PO header ID and the line number. When I do a get call, I will receive an inventory ID that I can use it in a put or post call to change the status or change the quantity or amount. How I'm doing it, so you can see here in the get URL, I have this string formatting where I need to put the URL, header ID, and the line number. I'm taking the API key from the asset, orchestrator asset. In the HTTP request, you can see here, I need to first select the accepted format. So we can select the different kind of format here, any JSON XML. So we are using XML format. Here I need to, in the endpoint, I need to pass the URL. I need to select the method. So we can select get, post, put. So here I'm selecting get method. In the headers, I need to pass, in the headers, I need to pass the API key, which is here. And when I run this piece of code, then I will get a status. You can see here, if the status code is between 100 and 200, then this is an informal response. So here I am validating the status. If the status is successful, which is somewhere between 200 and 300, then I can say successful response. Otherwise, this is not useful for me. So this is just a validation. We can throw an error to business as per this status code. Now come to the put method. So let's assume I have an inventory ID from this get. I need to put into this URL, which looks like this one. Here I need to put this inventory ID in place of 0. I'm using this string formatting because I'm keeping this this URL in a configuration file where if there is any change, we can just change in the config file. We don't need to really hard code it. Here I'm keeping the ID as well as the URL, put URL. Again, taking the API from the API key from the orchestrator asset. Then in the HTTP request, if I go to the property, you can see again the accepted format is XML, endpoint is string. We are selecting your put method, and then we can pass the header here. And when we do this, this will change the status. So this API call is for soft close for receiving. So if you change here the next status, it will change the status of the purchase order. So you just need to edit this part, and rest all will go the same. The last one is put a post. So that means if you want to change any quantity or price, then it's a little bit tricky and the tough one. You can see here again, I'm passing the inventory ID and the URL. So if I go to HTTP post request, you can see here, I need to again select accepted format, endpoint, post method, then headers. One more thing this time I need to pass is the body. You can see, and my body is also in the configuration or a text file. So body looks like this. Here I can pass the price, I can pass the quantity, which is number 1, and number 2, I can pass the amount value. So by this, I can change the quantity and as well as amount. Here, the output, we can store it at a header, at a dictionary header. So to get all the kind of log messages, and we can get the result in order string format and the status code, which is an integer. So you can validate whether the API call was successful or not. If the API call was not successful, you can highlight this issue to business saying that there was some problem with this. So they can check and they can take the manual action. Last slide of my presentation is what all are the lesson learned we have. The first one is the business communication is important at each step, because we are making the API calls. We cannot just make an API call, and without communicating to the business, because they will get panic and we will have lots of Jira tickets saying that what happened to my request. Second, provide useful information and links to the email communication, which is very, very important and which we found very useful. And we have used almost in every robots where we are sending the communication to business, because nobody wants to look and open and search for it. So they want a data and more personalized email, which looks like a system generated, but which is more personalized and customized. The third one is time spent on POC can take the future automation to the next level, which we learned is a very, very, you can say a good lesson learned for us, because, in the beginning, we always choose a easy step, go over the API, the UI automation over the API call, because this is not a simple one. And you need to do a very, very well research in it in order to make it successful. So I can say the POC help a lot to get it done, this automation. Number 4 is solution design is important, because, in order to scale up this automation, initially we thought we will do robot number 2, but in the end, we could able to do the robot number 1 till 7. Why this is happened? Because we have a proper solution design for this. So whenever business asks for a change, it's easy for us to implement and analyze as per the design. Last, the fifth one is we should know the business expectations, because business is also not very much aware that what can be the consequences if we make an API call. Because if something goes wrong, we need to know that where it went wrong, or what kind of exception scenario or business exception, or I can say the server side exception. So in order to do this, we need to do a little bit of research about the exception as well. The last and most important, which is don't forget the governance, because you are making an API call. When we run it for the hundreds of line items, we need to be very, very careful, because if you do any wrong call, then you don't know what robot did. So it's very, very important to keep a log in a text file or in an Excel file or whatever. So the governance plays an important role. So and last but not least, by this, what we learned that it's not limited to COUPA. Whenever you are trying to automate something in any of the application, always look for an option whether you can make an API call if you are planning to fetch something, or if you are planning to alter something in any application, because that will help a lot. And why we choose UiPath? Because API call, we can make it from any other application as well. But in order to do the end-to-end automation, it's very, very easy and simple with the help of UiPath to get it done end-to-end, because our output of one robot is the input to another one. So to have track record of everything, we thought it's a good idea to automate with the UiPath. That's it from my side, and I'm happy to answer if you have any questions.
Great, Ronak. I think was a very clear presentation. as it remains a bit quiet. So
Yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
maybe I can give some more information around API calls for
Mhm.
UiPath, because we actually love it. And Ronak, I think you did a great job with this use case. It looks really nice, and I definitely agree with the fact that you would go for an API call if you to make that stable connection with these applications. However, we also know from all the use cases that are brought to us that it's just not always possible. And so, but anyway, as many of you may know now, that we also did some additional work with something called Studio Pro, which we are actually combining now together with our normal Studio. So for the next releases, you will see that Studio and Studio Pro will come together. And Studio Pro actually had a facility in itself which is called Postman integration. Now, for those who have worked with APIs, they probably know what Postman is. Postman is actually a manager for APIs, and which helps you with documenting, but also with integration of API calls and the descriptions and so on. And what you now can do, you can actually use that Postman integration to import the API calls from Postman. So what it will result in is a collection of activities in your project, which you can use as a library. And these activities are actually prepared to do the API calls. So they are much clearer instead of building your own HTTPS request where you got to put in all the custom formatted options and parameters and arguments. You can now use actually direct activities specific for these Postman calls. And I actually looked it up for a moment, and there is a Postman collection available for COUPA. So you would be able to integrate it also via the Postman integration. And that will make it a lot easier to do those HTTPS API calls.
Thanks. Good to know. We will surely have a look.
Nice. Thanks, Dion. I see maybe one question from Chris Ronak. Chris is asking in the chat if one of the steps fail in the process, for example, a technical failure in the API, what happens or what is supposed to happen? Do you stop the process for transaction and move to the next transaction?
Yeah, so what we do, we always check the status. So if the status is between 200 and 300, when we say it's a successful response, if it is other than successful response, what we used to do, we used to take the error message, we used to take the existing status, and we write it down in an Excel, and we'll share that Excel with the business. So if an Excel file has the 10 rows, out of that 2 got failed, we write the reason, the fail, you can say what I can say, the result, why it got failed, and the business can have a look. So we don't stop it when there is a one failure. It's keep going until the last transaction.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
It's also clear to Chris, so that's good to hear. Ronak, thanks a lot for your time and your effort in this and sharing the willingness to share as well.
Thank you.
So very nice to see. I will end the session with 1 or 2 more remarks, then I will let you all go. So just a couple of small takeaways as well. Let's see. We're going the wrong direction with these slides. This is what we mentioned. The sun has actually started to shine here. Not sure because that's the dev meetup, but some takeaways. So we have the document understanding in the academy, as Barend was also referring to. So please check that out. There's also a white paper that is listed here. We will send you the slides afterwards. Then about the integrations part, not sure if all of you already were aware of this, but this is also something that it's in preview, and in the new release there will be more info about UiPath integrations. There's also quite some documentation on this in the documentation portal, so you know where to find that probably. And then also about the APIs, I just was checking that there are also some Instagram ones. So if you want to get wild with the Instagram, maybe you're an influencer, I don't know, then it's nice to check that out. And then last but not least, some other things. So I mentioned the long-term release. I think all of you signed up for the community platform. So previously we also had this meetup group, but because of all these platforms, it's difficult to stay aware of that. So we migrate from that to the UiPath platform. If you weren't aware, there's also a new use case repository on the forum. There's quite some stuff being added lately, so nice to check out. There's also a new developer report. So nice to see how your peers are experiencing the job as a developer. I think there's quite some nice content in there. So you can just Google and find it. The insider preview program. Not sure if you're all aware of that, but otherwise you can freely sign up. And in that case, you can already preview and see what new releases and functionalities are coming. We have a UiPath Together Amsterdam event. I'm not sure if that's open for everyone, but otherwise, well, it's good to know that there is a physical event planning to happen. And I hope it will still continue because of the COVID numbers. I just saw on LinkedIn there is also a new advanced learning plan. So if you're quite new to this area and community, there's some new content there, some more lessons about the framework, exceptions handling, debugging. So it's good to check that out. And last but not least, I heard there are the new applications are open for the MVPs. So I know there are quite some talented people in this virtual room. So it's definitely something to check out and to sign up for. It gives you access to a group of other people worldwide that you connect with, share knowledge with. You got the opportunity to talk to product managers about new functionalities. So quite some nice benefits. So feel free to sign up or maybe to recommend a colleague of yours to sign up. And I think that was pretty much it. So we got a little bit over time. I'm glad to see that most of you are still here. Next time, I think we're gonna organize a session in the first quarter, so probably February or so. We're planning to do that physically, as I mentioned. So then at this moment, we would say, let's see if the top is open to have a drink together. And again, thanks to the speakers. So a little applause. And also thanks to you for attending. Looking forward to seeing your contribution to the community in the future. So have a nice day and talk to you later.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.